All right, everyone, take a nice deep breath, please. All right. So I'm feeling guided to speak with you about multi-purpose trajectories within trajectories and why this is so important to bring to an illumination in your awareness, especially when you are a multi-trajectory light and sort of new to this understanding and emerging of this different type of way of existing and understanding the simplicity, yet the complexity within this type of framework of living. And it's an exciting type of experience because it's so multi-leveled. And it causes you to have to be awake. I mean, literally being extremely intentional about your way of being, how you live. I often say to a lot of my clients and students that we don't get to be lazy in this experience. You can no longer live your life by just a default. You literally have to be paying attention to what is consistently um, emerging and ensuing in your reality, because there are the different trajectories within the trajectories that contain certain elements and aspects of your multi-purpose mission for being here, right? And so you won't be fully aware of that if, in fact, you aren't awake. And this is something that I want to bring up in terms of I've made some distinctions in other renderings about the difference between being a multi-passionate light and someone who does a lot of different things versus when you are a multi-trajectory light that and being a multi-trajectorypreneur, so to speak, is that it's not about just doing a whole lot of different things and you're just passionate about so many different things. You are literally called, and what you're doing is a purpose, but it's multiple purposes, it's multi-mission. So when you think about when individuals feel they're called to a particular area, when you have a multi-purpose, that means that you are called to various things, and your journey and the way things unfold, a lot of times is much like the Russian nesting doll, where if you're familiar with the Russian nesting doll, it's the big doll that contains a lot of different dolls within it. And the more dolls that you pull out, they sort of take on a different level of uniqueness. The first few dolls that you pull out, they look identical to the big one. But the more that's pulled out, because in size they reduce, um, you can't put in as much detail to the ones that have the fuller features. So there are, some changes that are there. And sometimes there are different aspects within your purpose and even how you create, how that will play out. So I'm going to share an example from my own journey. So most of you know that I'm a published author of over 300 works, and a lot of those works are created in low to medium content types of publications in different formats, a lot of them primarily journal style formats, very interactive, engaging types of works. And so I create different versions even of the same project or same products or so. I do this not just with book products, I do it even with digital products, video and audio products, where sometimes when people look at, they want to produce something or they feel called or guided to produce, and they'll try to put everything in one specific type of work, and they feel they have to delay or they have to stall on it because they need it to be perfect. And one of the things that I would teach my students and clients is that instead of trying to wait to put something out there, put a version out there, and you can actually put another version out there. And I remember one of my clients a long time ago would try to go back in her publication and add more content to it, do different things. And I said, just create a different version of it. Allow your products or your projects to be in dimensions. And that's part of being multi-purposed, is because sometimes in your multi-purposeness, it's not always that you're going to be doing multiple different things. It may be that you are multiplying and maximizing just a specific initiative. Something that you are called to do, that you're answering different levels of the calling by producing different levels of a specific project or even services, because it's going to fit the needs of people on a certain level. So I'm going to go back to talking about my different book projects. So I would create a journal version and then maybe come back and do something that has a little bit more content or more Q&A interaction type of publication, and then one that's a little bit more extensive. It may be like a mini course format. And there are different needs for people at different times. And sometimes when you create just one version of something and you want it to be kind of a one size fits all, sometimes it just doesn't work out, like, it doesn't work out the best. I've sensed that, and has been my experience, that what works best for individuals is when they can sometimes have the specific strand of concentration that's required for their journey at that point. And they can do the work around that versus trying to give them a cohesive type of experience. And so when you are multi-purpose, and you can understand that there are trajectories within trajectories of your purpose, you can look at what you produce as being the same. So one trajectory of your audience, or who you're here to facilitate something for, only needs this strand, right? And then when you put it in another trajectory, that means that, okay, on this timeline, in a sense, you produced it in this way. And then on another, you produced it in a different variation. But it's all integrated into this experience, that you just have different offerings and opportunities. And this is just a practical way of me talking about this. And I wanted to set it up, or felt guided to set it up this way, so that when I start talking more about your actual paths of purpose, that can be in that Russian nesting doll way, but also in the more expansive way where you do have multiple purposes that are not identical. They're not the same, in a sense. Okay. So again, having different purposes. Now, I want to stay kind of with the analogy that I'm using, or example, I should say, with the publications. So one of my publications that comes to mind was in my earlier publishing days, when I would publish series. And there was a particular project that was called Feed the Right Piggy Bank. And I did a twin version of it that was called Feed the Right, WRITE Piggy Bank. So one was just a general, for just anyone who was interested in leveling up their worth and honoring their worth and choosing aligned wealth creation, to making sure that they were feeding the right piggy bank, that they were not wasting time just trying to make money and putting their time and efforts in endeavors that really weren't aligned for them and really weren't going to be the best return on investment. So they need to be worthwhile collateral types of initiatives. So I had one that was just for anyone who was interested in that. And then I had one that was for writers, for authors, make sure that they were investing in their time and resources in the right types of writing initiatives. But what I ended up doing was creating different versions of that same project, but giving it a different name, and then also incorporating contributors to the project. So one of my publication, Feed the Right Piggy Bank, I also created a version of that one that was called On the Right Track. And they had different titles, but the same subtitles. So the same content that was in Feed the Right Piggy Bank was in On the Right Track. It was positioned a little bit differently. And then I had someone who contributed a forward to that publication. So it gave it a completely different feel. The way that I did the interactive pages were a little bit different, but same content, but tweaked differently, and an added contributor, which made it a completely different type of publication. Because instead of speaking from the vantage point of feeding the right piggy bank and, putting your time and efforts and resources, into the right thing as it relates to the wealth creations, this particular one was same subtitle, so to speak, but it was about being on the right track, the right path, the right track of life for your creations around this specific initiative. And then did a different work on the right WRITE track, which was for authors. And so if we look at this in dimensions, in a sense, it's okay, in this trajectory, here was the books that were produced. In another trajectory, then we have these works, but they are framed differently. They're framed differently, and they actually appeal to a different audience, even though it is the same content, because different titles draw people in a different way. And the reason why I bring this up is because sometimes, individuals are like, well, I don't really want to produce multiple versions of the same thing. Well, you can, but you can tweak how it is. So if you look at in terms of yourself on a different timeline, there may be similarities, but you aren't going to be doing things the exact same way. They're not going to shape up the same way, even though the outcome will produce the same thing in a sense in terms of results, but the way that you get the results and the different type, the type of results that you get may pan out differently. So it's the same when you have a multi-purpose and there are trajectories within trajectories, that they can have similarities, but then at the same time, how the outcome for this part of that endeavor just plays out differently. So for me, instead of creating another volume or version of Feed the Right Piggy Bank and Feed the Right WRITE Piggy Bank, which those publications are part of an 8-part book series that cover marketing and profits on different levels. But instead of continuing with that one and creating a different version in that series, there's another series that was started that, again, has the same kind of core theme, but the appeal to it in terms of the direction that I chose to take with that was different. So when we're talking about Feed the Right Piggy Bank, and it's a nice piggy bank on the front of the cover, the On the Right Track has a track field, right? So we're talking about tracks and using that metaphor for this particular publication. Then again, having someone else contribute to it and putting their perspective in it, it gave it a completely different look and feel. And believe it or not, the second versions of those publications sold better than the first, right? So again, different purposes within purposes. So let me expound upon this a little bit more in terms of when you are now in a particular mission. So if some of you are familiar with some of my empires that are empires within empires. There are ones where there were twin empires, but they have different core focuses. So I'll use an example. So my primary empire, Majesty-ALL-MIGHTY, While She Does It All, did not start out with that same name. It was just While She Does It All. And I also had a twin empire to that that focused on the writing and speaking, and about me writing and speaking about everything, in a sense, because I produce so much content and I could write and talk about so many different things. So that was a different empire. That was a twin empire, and then it was later rebranded. But where the While She Does It All focused on the production aspect and a lot of what I would do in my coaching and consulting and a variety of different things. But the other empire, again, was more so focused on my speaking and my writing initiatives. And again, I ended up rebranding. So they were the same empires, but the focal point of one was more illuminate about this specific focus, and the other one was about that, even though you could get the same things from each empire, but the way that they were positioned, one had a primary leader for that one than the other one. So same content and context in a sense, but again, repositioning of the different ways that it would appeal to different people who were going to be more drawn to what I wrote about and what I would speak about, and also wanted to be trained and coached in those areas. That's what that empire was for. But if they wanted to be a part of other initiatives that were from the other empire, it's the same. It's just repositioned, because whatever I would do in production still will fall under my speaking, like for podcasting or different initiatives that I had in the production area. Then they could still access that part of the empire, but that is just not the primary focus for that, right? So looking at these as being in different trajectories is that they are pretty much the same, but on one trajectory, that's playing out different. Like, oh, this company looks different here. And so it's still multi-purpose, multi-trajectories, because you're going to get different levels of people who have a different appeal to each one, to each version, right? And I've done the same thing with courses. And so again, this is still multi-purpose with trajectories within trajectories around how you create with your content, how you produce your services. So again, different, I've always had twin empires. Even before While She Does It All came about, my Wow empires came about. When I first started in the coaching industry, so to speak, the life purpose strategist industry, I had a service that was called the Bridge Connection. And it was about focusing on helping women in leadership make transitions. It was a bridge for them and connecting to their true self. And then I had a twin service that birthed from that, but it actually, they came up at the same time. I just didn't recognize it. Another trajectory that had formed was a service called MINI Ways to Abundance. And how that actually came about was when individuals who were talking about they wanted to coach with me, but they felt like they couldn't afford it or different things like that, then something that was already emerging, that again, I wasn't aware of it at the time until later, that wow, these were actually birthed at the same time. But this one here, the secondary one, ended up being the bigger one. And so I developed products to help people develop an abundant mindset. And so when people were talking about, oh, I don't know if I can afford this or different things, it's like, well, they needed to level up in mindset first, connect to their true abundance, and then they could cultivate what they needed to now come to this service. Well, in that trajectory opening up, that became the larger, more expanded empire. And then it started me actually on my publishing journey, because my first publication was called Abundance You Are It, Inner Game Mastery for Emerging Leaders. And then I've always had this twin energy that would be taking place, because for both empires, I had podcasts for both empires. different levels of the services. They were pretty much the same, but one had a core focus on the true self in the transition, and then the other one was more so about learning the truth of your abundant self, and it was more entrepreneurial, so to speak. And but still both very transitionary types of experiences, because it's taking people from one phase of their journey to another. And with my many ways to abundance, that was for any and everyone, in a sense, men and women alike. Where with the bridge connection, even though I did serve men through that too, but my primary focus was women who were in leadership, making transitions into entrepreneurship, doing more expansive things in ministry, or whether they were going to become authors or developing themselves in different ways. They were in life transition, but it was for a mission. And the primary focus was for them to connect to the true essence of who they were, so that they could authenticate these different missions and purposes. So even though we have two businesses that are showing up as their own separate entities, so to speak, but they're crossover initiatives where they're pretty much the same. One's more product focused, one was more coaching focused, but then again, the other one became the bigger empire, which then helped to birth all of the other strands that that came forth. And I digressed a little bit to talk about that, just to say that when you look at what you do, instead of, oh, I have to have it all in this, you look at it as in these different categories, but the way they show up will look a little bit different. I call it, is business refacing, in a sense. It's basically what I mentioned in terms of when go with the products and courses and things, that I would do a reface to them, where it's the same content, but it's tweaked differently, and there's a different component added, and it's got a different rebrand to it. It is renamed and reframed and then relaunched in its own uniqueness, in a sense. But it's a trajectory that is pulled out of another trajectory, a purpose that's pulled out of another purpose. So again, this happens with your life, and it happens with your mission. That's how you start to look at the different strands of what you're called to do, is because there'll be something about it within one aspect, and then you pull it out and it's tweaked a little bit differently, because some people are going to get that. Yeah, it's going to be different for everyone. So you want to have that variety. All right, you want to have that variety, and you don't want to be afraid to actually create multiple dimensions of a particular, initiative. And believe it or not, in my life, I do this the same. Just like I may create different trajectories in terms of, let's say, going out, if you want to go out to a restaurant and you want to eat. Well, I have a trajectory at home that I can have that same experience, but then still go out, still and still go out. Not necessarily the same day, uh, but even if it's in a short time frame. And the reason why I just explained this in practicality is because when the more you become aware and intentional, and you see the purposes within the purposes, you have to start off sometimes with something that you're already working with. Then that awakens you to the details of other elements and aspects that are speaking to you about other strands of your calling that will be different, right? But the reason why people can't identify sometimes with something else that's calling them to be doing alongside of what they're doing is because the conditioning in terms of how we think, and not paying attention to life. And as I mentioned before, with this journey, you don't get to be lazy, because life will become uncomfortable and disruptive when there's multiple trajectories that want to play out through you. And this becomes a natural way of living and breathing and just being. So it's not complicated, even though it can seem complex, right? But once you embody this more, and it is your full-on way of being, then it's like it's no big thing. So for some, it could seem weird to well, why would I create so many versions of this? And it's only if it's calling you to do so. It's just one of the reasons why I would do, well, how I kind of started in this is to move the energy around things, is that I would not stall on putting something out by thinking I had to have all these components, because I was like, well, if I feel that what I have right now is enough, I'll work with this. I don't need to think I have to put more for this. It's just I need to give this a different frame. So if it's a journal and something that's low content, then that's the frame that it's in, that framework. Then when people engage this level of the content, they're not expecting something more. They understand, okay, this is a journal, or it's an affirmations journal, or it's an action planner. Here's what I use this for. So I would just move the energy again with different things by saying, okay, I can create another version of this, but I don't have to stall in putting value out here in the world. I can go ahead and create this version and then take even that same version, in a sense, the same content, and then come back and do something different. It's not like starting over, because I have a base and then I'm just adding to it what I would feel like, oh man, I need to put this in. I need to put this in. But when I create in dimensions, I can do that. I can create different versions of it and either let it have the same name with a different subtitle or an extended version of it, or just the different format of it, or I can give it a different name. And so again, the more that you grow comfortable in this way of being, in terms of being multi-purpose and looking at everything as their trajectories within trajectories, it will help you to um, align better with your missions and your purposes, and also not feel confined and and restricted, in a sense, to not being able to do more than just one variation of something, or again live out. And believe it or not, that's how your life is going to play out, is that there are certain experiences that you will have in a multidimensional way right here in this reality, and even how you serve individuals. Some people, think about just in terms of this, some people who maybe need a coaching program from you, if you in the entrepreneurial arena. But someone may need just a VIP day, or someone may need just a seminar. All of these are trajectories. They're all trajectories. And that's how you find your alignment for your purpose, is because when you create these different dimensions, then the people who in that trajectory only need that type of experience. They only align with that timeline, if you will, to sync up with that type of offering. And it is the same even with your life. Even with your life, you will get different people on different trajectories that you rendezvous with during certain times. And that's a whole nother, conversation. But going back to the trajectories within the trajectories of your purpose, again, once you start in this practical way, then things will be revealed to you in terms of what your more expanded purpose is. Now, how certain things were revealed to me was that because I studied my life, like I'm the journalist of my life, I'm the biologist of my life, and then I'm also the anchor of my life, meaning once I get my journalist analysis in terms of gathering the information from my experience, and then I dissect it, so to speak, then I can come and broadcast it, broadcast whatever version that I need to, at that time. But it caused me to pay attention to detail, because I could see within different experiences how I'm serving so many different purposes here. So I can categorize these and actually make these trajectories. So an example is just like with doing coaching and consulting, where I'm teaching people various things or coaching them through, whether it's producing their own products, or starting a business, or just consulting them or coaching them life and career, just or health well-being, whatever it is, all of those are different strands. They're all different strands. So each one of those are trajectories as it relates to even an industry. Okay. So when I would look at the totality of my experience, I would say, wow, so I'm this, and this, serving under what seems to be one role, but I'm playing multiple roles. So I can pull a strand out of this and then just put something out there for that specific audience, which brings in a different trajectory of individuals, right? And so because I've created so many different products, I can serve on so many different levels and so many different trajectories based on that, because I pull out these different strands of life, the details, and then I create content or platforms for that specific trajectory, that specific audience, right? So again, when you pay attention to your life in that categorized way, it starts revealing to you more of what are other callings, what are other purposes that you are here to fulfill, sometimes on a much more expansive level, even if it is for a season, even if it is for a season, or if it is that it is just for you to produce content for that. So you have to look at the multi-purpose trajectories within the trajectories. So again, going back to what I've been sharing in terms of the product within the product, the empire within the empire, you know, the life's purpose within the life's purpose. What are the different multi-trajectory experiences that are presented, and then how you engage those? And again, one of the reasons why people, especially when you're called to be in this multi-trajectory purpose type of experience, the reason why life gets difficult at times, or even what you're doing, you feel you sometimes cap out, is because there's so much more that's wanting to come forth, or a different level of your purpose is asking for you to engage it more, or to create different strands, different versions. And again, it can seem like that's a lot going on, but it isn't when you look at it as these are all different realities, but playing in one. And of course, the way that I teach this way of living and being, it puts it in a very simplified type of framework or structure, if you will. And your life still operates as one cohesive experience where it's just like any other thing. It doesn't even seem like, oh, it's extra something to do, because the way that your anatomy works, it doesn't categorize that in that way. So that's why I can have multiple things the way that I do, is because the way that I'm oriented looks at these as they're different realities playing out in this experience, but it doesn't see it as, oh, you've got so much here. No, it sees it as, on this timeline, that's what it is, on this one, and that's what it is. And from a vibrational standpoint, that's kind of how it plays out. That's kind of how people sync up with it. So again, when you look at it from this framework, it helps you to identify more so what you need to be doing at every given, any given time, and where you need to pull back, give pause, where you need to shift and do a little bit more in or so, and then let that all kind of simultaneously be there together. But there are multiple functions that are happening, and sometimes one will call you more so than the other. So I want to go back to early on with, my first coaching businesses, and how that was playing out. And at one point, when the many ways to abundance became the bigger empire, I had more attention there, and I was working more in that business. It was almost as if the bridge connection in some regards didn't even exist anymore, but it still existed. And then that became more product based. It's like they shifted roles in a sense. And then later on, things got rebranded and it came back around, and it was, different things, but it was just that this trajectory called me more at that time, but the other is still operational. and people could still sync up with different levels of what was being provided there, more so through products, where I was full on with this one, where initially it started out, as I mentioned, as the product base. So I know I'm sharing quite a bit here, but again, just sharing this so that you get just a basic understanding of how your trajectories in life, how they shift, how some things will be seasonal, how some things will be more signature at different times. And you just have to let it kind of morph into what it's going to be. But as I mentioned, look at it in that Russian nesting doll way. A big doll, yes, that contains all of these different dolls, and they're all different strands that people can have experiences with. But within each experience contains another experience, and you actually want to dimensionalize it out because they each have a purpose. So that's something, again, when you feel stuck around something, just look at what is the purpose within the purpose within this experience. What is the trajectory within this experience? When you're putting your works out there, your certain purposes out there, and it doesn't seem to be gaining the traction or doing what you felt it should be, it should be doing, or results you believe it should have gotten by now, ask, what is the experience within this? What is the trajectory? What is the purpose within this purpose? Like I said, I've had this happen on so many different levels. Certain publications that I have published or articles that I have published, where sometimes it could be a phrase that was in, or a chapter name or theme that was in a publication that wanted to be its own work. In my first publication, Abundance You Are It, Inner Game Mastery for Emerging Leaders, there was a section, a chapter that was called the state of I Shall Never Want. And within that particular chapter was a core theme called the City of Imagining. And so there was a section in there that was called the City of Imagining, and I talked about my journaling process. Well, get this. The City of Imagining ended up not only becoming its own publication, it also ended up becoming a platform. And then the State of I Shall Never Want ended up becoming its own publication. And actually the content was not duplicated from the publication that gave the inspiration. It's just that the inspiration from what was existing created another strand. So then I was able to produce content for that and pulled out, again, the trajectory, the purpose, the mission, the offering from within one offering that gave way to other offerings. So again, you'll see your life start to play out in some regards to that, type of dynamics as well. And you want to be intentional about that. You want to pay attention because there's always something else contained within the experience. Sometimes life will call you to really be the detective of your situation, to be the biologist, to dissect it in a sense. And then there's sometimes when it's like, no, even though it may have all these different potential outcomes, sometimes you won't be called to actually dive into that. All right. But because it's there is the potential. And at another time, maybe it's time to open up that Russian nesting doll, and maybe you only pull one or two dolls out. You don't pull all of the other dolls out because that's something within your experience. If it calls for that, it may be that, again, it could be at a different time. It doesn't always have to be. But the reason why I'm just sharing this in this way is that, again, whenever you start feeling stuck around something, it could be another trajectory is wanting to get your attention. So you have to be mindful about that. And again, sometimes experiences that you have, even though you have them maybe having it one time, it could be that it's calling for another dimension of it to come forth. You just have to be present with that. So just pay attention to your life. So I could talk on and on about this, and I have different works that relate to this. Be sure to check in the description so that you can see some of the different offerings, and also get an opportunity to look more at my demonstration of how my multiverse plays out for my multi-hyphenate, multi-trajectory type of experience, how that plays out in how I serve, how my allness, is demonstrated on so many different levels, and in a very simplistic way, a very simplistic way. So you can also learn more about the multi-trajectory Academy if you're a multi-trajectory starpreneur, and learn more about those different offerings below. So I hope that this gave you some expansiveness in terms of living a multi-trajectory type of experience and starting to ground and anchor this with the fundamentals so that you can see that this will be a natural way of living and being. But in its initial stages, because having to sort of, I don't say detach in a sense, but it is break away from some of the traditional structures, is that you'll find yourself more confined when you don't allow the trajectory to give way to another trajectory, to give way to another trajectory, when you're trying to do everything just in a fixed framework. So I'm going to leave it here just to not overwhelm you anymore and let you ground this. And I do encourage you to go back and listen to this several times. All right. We're all about the multi-trajectory life here. And I just want to wish you the absolute best as you are moving forward on this journey. And I look forward to being back with you soon. Take care. And as always, stay blessed.